me, damn it!
Get ready for another edition of It's Still Real to Me, the most important wrestling podcast of these troubling times. Now here's our host, the Salty Seaman, and Mark Olson.
The Salty Seaman doing a little different thing here, working with Mark Olson from Portcalls and Politics. If you listen to a lot of my stuff, or you've been listening to Portcalls and Politics, you know we've done a lot of things together, talking mostly military-related, but also politics. It turns out as we were interviewing each other, we are both quite the wrestling fans and began discussing maybe a little offshoot. Politics seemed a little too much depressing kind of thing to get into. Military stuff all the time. But pro wrestling is a more fun topic, I think. And when, even though there's a market full of people doing this, I think we have some unique voices to put in here. And even, as we'll start off here, military-related as well. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing fantastic. It's Friday, and looks like the rain stopped. And hopefully we'll have a nice weekend. But Cleveland Browns got off the snide. Not that I'm a Browns fan, but I don't think any NFL or professional sports team should be that pathetic. So, good on them for getting a nice win.
Always have support. I'm a big football fan. One of my best shipmates from my first ship. Shout out to Mike Gassinies from Seatown. Of course, a big fan of the hapless Browns. So, for his sake, I give a shout out to the Browns for not fucking that one up.
Absolutely.
So this right now they work unless we get hit with a cease and desist with someone who owns the trademark to this. As far as I can tell, Still Real to Me, damn it, is open for podcasting purposes. So that will be the title going forward, and we're going to discuss a lot of different things about wrestling. Give background on the name of it. Just search David Willis, Still Real to Me, damn it, on YouTube. They'll explain everything you need to know about the title of the show. And here on our first episode, we had a little discussion going back and forth on how good was the Attitude Era? How good was the NWO, that late '90s Monday Night War era? Is it full of rose-colored glasses, or was it really that good? Now I posit that while there was a lot of great things going on and revolutionary things going on, it was also an era of a lot of garbage that we kind of forget about when we put together highlight packages. I'll throw it over to you, Mark, and you give me your opinion of the Attitude Era.
What I remember most about the Attitude Era, and I know there's a lot of Vince Russo haters out there, I would not consider myself a fan, but the amount of hate and discontent that gets thrown, I think, is a little bit lopsided, because one thing that I always remember about the Attitude Era was that you did have distinct characters, and it did seem like everyone was involved in some sort of feud, and there was some hot shotting and some things that didn't maybe make sense. But I did remember that the roster seemed to be maximized, and that's one of my critiques that I have, against the current product. And so I think from that standpoint, the Attitude Era really provided a great medium for young superstar, young talent to get over in traditional ways with the heel and face, but also to have unique characters. So that's what I really look at. And besides, they had tons of moments, but that's why I think it's by far the best era of professional wrestling. And I'm sure there's some that agree with me and others that think I'm completely out to lunch. So that's kind of what started our discussion. And then we were like, hey, let's go and watch a random episode of Nitro and Raw. And then we chose April 6th, 2000, April 6th, 1998. So I'm excited to go through it too and hear your thoughts.
A very interesting point. We will definitely do an episode on Russo by himself at some point, but I will say I agree. He was a guy who felt it was important that everyone on the card had a storyline, whether they were jerking the curtains or the main event. And certainly that is one thing you'll see in every single little guy has some kind of something going on. This date is very important to me. You picked this date basically out of the blue, and it happened to be the month I returned home on leave after my first during my first tour in the Navy. I was on the USS Blue Ridge in Yokosuka, Japan. I had not been home to the States watching any kind of wrestling regularly for about a year and a half. I grew up a fan, casually watching the Southern stuff, Crockett Wrestling, Crockett Promotions, a little bit of Memphis, a little bit of Florida that kind of snuck in, Georgia Championship Wrestling through the 80s. Became a serious fan in the early 90s, right when both companies were kind of falling out of their popularity. I always seemed to miss the high points and always stuck around for the lows. Just my luck. But yeah, I was a huge fan. Posters all over my wall. Never missed anything that said wrestling. Georgia back in the day had the 7 hours of wrestling Saturday night block. I got to see a lot of things from around the country. World Class in Texas. Ladies Pro Wrestling. Not Glow. There was another company. LAPW, I think. Ladies Association of Professional Wrestling or something. So Memphis, a lot of different things I saw. Kind of about midway through high school, kind of fell out of love with it. I'd still watch on occasion, and just say like, oh, hey, they got Shawn Michaels as a heel now by himself. That's neat. There's old friggin' Vinny Vegas is now playing this guy Diesel. Okay, that's cool. Oh, Sting is fighting Sid Vicious on a beach. I don't know what the hell this is all about. So I would just kind of see those things in glimpses. Joined the Navy, went overseas, became friends with a guy who's a pretty huge pro wrestling fan. In fact, he's an independent wrestler, has been for 20 years in Kentucky. Kind of got me back into it. He'd get tapes from home, and we got, they show Raw and the pay-per-views for free on AFN. I actually ended up seeing the King of the Ring and Austin's famous, Austin 316 speech while on watch on the ship. But again, I was not following it as well as I could just because, ship schedule and, I'd come into berthing if it was on, I'd watch it. If not, I didn't think about it. But this month, April 1998, is the month I went home, and I am almost positive this episode of Raw and the Nitro, I watched both of these the night they were on, and with fresh eyes as someone who'd not really been able to sit down and watch an entire Raw yet for quite a few years.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's interesting because I have distinct memories of when I still watched wrestling and then kind of when I briefly sampled it, afterwards, and then obviously when I started watching it a lot more. So for me, I remember the Macho King and when he, hit Hogan with the scepter or whatever it was, and then around that time when a lot of people stopped watching wrestling. I kind of watched it a little bit more when Bret Hart was champ, and I think you had like wrestling on Saturday morning, and so
WWF Superstars. Yeah.
Yep, WWF Superstars. So I would watch, and I remember there was like a period where Bob Backlund made a comeback, and
he won the championship. Bret Hart, Owen convinced Martha, their mom, to throw in the towel, and it was all a dastardly plan by that nasty Owen Hart to screw his brother out the title.
Yeah, and they talked about Backlund, how he was like a big thing, and I thought he looked horrible, and I was young at the time. But I lost interest. A distinctive memory that I do have of wrestling back then was Adam Bomb when he made his debut, and I thought he was like the coolest fucking guy ever.
Okay. That was somebody Lee, wasn't it?
It was Brian Clark.
What was it?
Brian Clark.
Brian Clark, that's right. He come back as
Wrath.
He was in some tag team too.
Yeah, he was in, and then he was Chronic.
He was Chronic. That's right. He was Chronic. It was
with Brian Adams.
Yeah, not quite the charisma or talent of Sid Vicious, if that tells you anything.
Yeah, but I remember there were those little glimpses.
Sid Vicious did have a lot of charisma. He didn't have a lot else going for him other than his body, but that dude did have some charisma.
I love Sid Vicious. I love him.
That was one of my favorite wrestlers.
I love him.
I do not talk shit about Sid.
Yeah. And well, he won't let you either. I wouldn't mess with him. He's crazy. I remember this. He's a
good old boy from West Memphis who I think went back to bug extermination, which he did before he wrestled.
But I remember those little glimpses, and then as far as the WCW product, the only thing I knew about the product before I started watching it during the Monday Night Wars was actually came from comic books. Because if you bought one of those comic books, in the stores, a lot of times they had WCW advertising in them, like the Road Warriors, who I didn't know who the Road Warriors were until they debuted in WWF.
I knew that they were. I said, grow up. I say, this is different to where you grew up, because I grew up in Georgia. So with one of the major promotions there, Dusty Rhodes, Road Warriors, Four Horsemen, Ric Flair were just household names. Even though I wasn't really watching it, the Road Warriors, you knew, like, someone showed you a picture of them, you remembered who they were.
Yeah,
like, they were scary. When you're 8 years old and you see those guys, they're scary.
We did not. I didn't get it in where I was raised in Illinois. I didn't get any of that programming. So they were. So I only knew of
which
Sting.
is funny because the Road Warriors are kayfabe from Chicago.
There you go. Yeah,
they're actually Minnesota, but yeah, they were kayfabe a Chicago group.
Yep. And so I stopped watching, and really my knowledge of WCW was very limited. I had seen Sting, but it was mainly just there was some maybe television show and they had Sting on it, or maybe there was an ad, something like that. I didn't really know anything about that product.
But you knew who Ric Flair was.
I knew about Ric Flair, but I didn't really get to know about Ric Flair until he came to WWF.
So like the significance of him bringing that belt in meant nothing to you.
No.
For the rest of us, that was one of the biggest breaks of kayfabe, I think, in my childhood.
Yeah, I didn't.
Watching showed up on TV with a big gold belt. Like, I just sat there in utter shock, and as soon as it was over, I called my cousin. They're like, "Oh my God!" He's like, "Did you just see that?" You know, like, we were just killing on top of each other. Like, oh my God, they're bringing in Flair. He brought the belt with him. It's like, I guess he really did own that belt. I'm like, well, little bits of the truth that kind of came out at that point of what had happened, and we knew it was a real contract problem. He really just up and left.
Yeah, I didn't know about any of that stuff, and WCW and the NWA were very foreign concepts because it was so dominated by WWF programming.
So I'm so interested to get that dichotomy between us, because just from a geographic standpoint. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people did know, because I mean it was on Superstation. If you had cable, you had WCW/Crockett.
But the Superstation had not made inroads in the Midwest by that time.
Really?
Yeah. It wasn't until later that Ted Turner really expanded. Same thing with the Atlanta Braves. All of a sudden we started getting Atlanta Braves baseball, and that was always an oddity, and we didn't understand why.
Because I remember getting WGN as a kid on satellite. I saw tons of Cubs games.
Yeah. So I didn't really watch any of the Southern wrestling product to speak of, and it was completely foreign. But there were some names that I knew about. Dusty Rhodes, a little bit, but a lot of it was not in its proper context of how important they were to wrestling.
So you didn't read the Aftermaths then?
No. It was everything was very WWF based and kind of through that mindset and mold, which would also interestingly, and I'll get to this, when I started watching wrestling again. Okay, I would catch a little bit of the WWF product, and a couple things that I remember Mankind made his debut, and I don't know if maybe just for a few weeks I started watching.
He was one of my favorite wrestlers. I was so excited to see him. I was in the berthing watching Raw, and I watched the first Mankind skit, and I was overjoyed.
Yeah, and I remember watching him and just being really terrified and unnerved because he was something completely different.
It was a great. Well, we'll get into the show here in a bit too.
Yeah, and so largely, but I still didn't consider myself a wrestling watcher because I had fallen out of it. The whole Shawn Michaels, the Diesel stuff, maybe I caught a little bit of it, but it wasn't really that important to me. And then even the formation of the NWO, I was not aware of that what brought me back to wrestling were two things. The first thing was that I was in a Blockbuster video, and which is bringing us back, and they had the WrestleMania. Would it have been WrestleMania? What was the one with Cactus Jack Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie versus the New Age Outlaws? It was this WrestleMania.
That would have been this year. That would have been 2 weeks before this episode we're talking about. So
right,
the '98 one, which was 12.
Yeah. So that WrestleMania brought me back to considering the WWF. Okay. Now, the bigger thing was, I'm in high school. One of my buddies, he says, "Hey man, you got to come over on Monday because we're gonna watch Nitro." And I said, "What the hell's Nitro?" And he described me. He's like, "Oh, well, they have like Hulk Hogan's like a bad guy now." I was like, "Hulk Hogan's a bad guy?" Yeah, and like Razor Ramon and Diesel are like in this NWO group. And I said, "Okay, that's cool." And he's like, "But there's this really big guy who is like bald-headed, and he just comes to the ring and kills people." And I was like, "Really?" And so Goldberg was about.
So you came back in around this, like you saw the WrestleMania before. Like you came in around this time. Like this is right when Goldberg was getting his big push.
Right. I came in and I started watching Nitro, and then maybe we switched to watch WWF, but not really. It was mostly just watching Nitro. And it was something completely foreign that I hadn't seen before. And I remember the first match I saw with Goldberg. It wasn't his first match. It wasn't Hugh Morris, but it was like I want to say, did he go against? He went against someone from the Flock, I think, and just killed him. Or maybe Brad Armstrong. But
that sounds like something. Yeah, Brad Armstrong.
But it was early. And then somehow I either got I got a hold of a Blockbuster video, the WrestleMania video, or maybe someone taped it or something like that. But I think it was at Blockbuster, so it would have been much later that I actually gave WWF a chance, and I watched this guy Terry Funk wearing a stocking over his head and carrying a chainsaw, and I was like, what the hell is this? This seems so different and grungy compared to this Nitro thing that I had seen. And then I got more interested because the product seemed really different. You had these New Age Outlaws, which they were like brand new, and I watched and I was like, whoa, maybe I need to watch this a little bit more. And so that got me into the habit of doing the switch over and everything. But it was definitely a kid at school, a guy that I played in the football team with, was talking about this guy Bill Goldberg, and he didn't even know his first name. He just said it's like Goldberg, and the NWO. I started watching that, and then the WrestleMania, that dumpster match between New Age Outlaws and Cactus and Chainsaw Charlie were like, whoa, that seems real. It just seems different, a little bit more hardcore. And that's how I got into it. And ironically, this episode that we're about to review is 2 weeks after WrestleMania.
Correct. So it's a good lead-in. So like that really does bring us into this episode of Raw, and we're going to judge it, factoring in, of course, nostalgia, factoring in, how important it was at the time, and also just trying to give it an objective view. So to be specific, this is, this is the height of the Monday Night Wars era. Brief background, if you're listening to this, you probably know WCW decided to go head-to-head with Raw on Monday nights, and they kept up in the ante. They started with the NWO, Hall and Nash coming in, Hogan's turn, Bischoff's turn. WWF counter-reacted with DX and Stone Cold, essentially, which would lead into the Mr. McMahon, the character. And at this point, about April 1998, they're going neck and neck. That Nitro had been killing them in the ratings, but the rise of Stone Cold started to even those ratings out, and it would eventually start stomping them. But this month, there's a lot of things that go on the rest of this month. We're only going to concentrate on these 2 episodes. But again, I come in here with I'm 2 days off the plane out of Japan. It's my first time sitting down and watching a Raw, and from the beginning to the end, since I can't even remember. To give you a little background, this episode aired, it says Raw is War and Raw Warzone, which are 2 separate shows, which we'll also talk about. Aired April 6, 1998, from the On Center Complex in Syracuse. Some background: who were the champions at the time? Stone Cold Steve Austin was the champion, just won it at WrestleMania from Shawn Michaels. Your Intercontinental Champion was The Rock, who had just taken over leadership of the Nation of Domination. Tag Team Champions were the New Age Outlaws. Newly joined the DX at this point. European Champion was Triple H, also of DX. And your Light Heavyweight Champion, who will not figure into the show whatsoever, is Taku Michinoku.
The Michinoku driver was the shit, though.
Fantastic wrestler that was completely squandered by the WWF at the time.
Well, he did have bangs, so I don't know what you're going to really do with that.
So the episode starts off with the old intro to Raw, which I have not seen in a long time, and our announcers are, which I think we're still some confusion of why, but I had a theory, which we'll talk about later, of why they're 2 different announce teams. One is Jim Ross, good old JR, the greatest in the business, according to me, and very young and doesn't even sound the same Michael Cole are announcing our show. And you might be wondering, where is Jerry Lawler? He is the other voice of the Attitude Era. Well, wait an hour and we will get to him. Now we get into a lot of pyro opening, which they did for a very long time. They don't quite do it the same way anymore. But my main takeaway was they had no idea how to ventilate this place. It is just completely covered in smoke after they set off the ballyhoo and brouhaha of the pyro. So in the first segment is Vince McMahon coming out to announce, he's came to an agreement with Stone Cold, and Stone Cold is going to be, be a more corporate champion. But this is real early in he's not even Mr. McMahon yet. He hasn't completely flipped. The character in kayfabe is trying to be a face and failing on purpose, as opposed to following. We're also not too many 6 months, I think, removed from Survivor Series, where he legitimately tried to be a face after the Bret Hart Screwjob debacle, and I realized he was a better heel. So we're still getting a little bit of this. There's no stooges. There's no, big swagger walk. There's no theme song. It's just Vince McMahon, and he's giving us this announcement. He guarantees the Syracuse crowd will get their money back if they don't see corporate Stone Cold. The crowd is absolutely insane for Austin. This is the very, very start of his build curve up, I'd say. Your thoughts on the opening segment?
I love the video. So they did the video, which is a recap of WrestleMania, and then the recap of the previous week. I thought it was fantastic. It'll become more apparent when we talk about the Nitro show. But the lead-in was great, and then I love the Monday Night Raw, I guess, opening video with like the heavy metal and all that stuff. I think it really sets the tone for what this show's trying to do. It's something distinct. It's high tempo, high energy. As far as the Vince McMahon promo, I thought it was great. Like you said, he is trying to be a face, but you can see that inner dick briefly want to poke out when the crowd is just against him and everything like that. I think
it's like a toad head peeking out of some boxer shorts.
Yeah, I think when all's said and done, it sets the stakes for the show, but not really just for the show. The entire way that this show began was really ushering in a different era, because post WrestleMania, you had major developments, and so I would argue that my critique for modern wrestling is that you don't always get that. Hey, we have WrestleMania, we do this build for it, and then once WrestleMania happens, things are going to change, and this is how they're going to change, and then that change is manifested in that next year. I don't necessarily get that sense as much anymore because you do have the continuity of like Roman Reigns being at the top of the main event storylines and so on and so forth.
You never had a changeover like, I mean, this changeover of the guard is so different than you can't have a modern one unless they really got behind somebody who was a fan favorite. The closest thing is honestly Becky Lynch right now. It's a very close parallel to Stone Cold's rise.
I think
a story for another day.
Yeah, and so long story short, I think it was done. It was done very well. I like this opening. I think we know where it's going to go, and that's fine. But there's just enough where you can suspend your disbelief that, okay, maybe Stone Cold ends up, becoming corporate. But in our hearts, we know that there's going to be a payoff, and we're excited to see that payoff. So yeah, I give this high marks.
The crowd buys for 1 second Stone Cold's going to be a permanent corporate guy. Like, no one buys it, but they don't care. They want to see what's going to happen.
Right, exactly.
They know what's going to happen, but they want to see it, and the anticipation is killing them. I give it overall a B to a B plus. Really, the smoke from the pyro really kills it for me because this is a company that is known for their production quality and like not having the ventilate. And this is not the only time this would happen during the Attitude Era, where they didn't know how to ventilate their pyro. So it really is a downturn for me because it just makes it look kind of low rent. But I think Vince is completely on point where his character needs to be at this point. So in that respect, I think it worked exactly how they needed it to work.
Yeah, and I give this an A. I think you give it high, B plus or so. But I think we're both in agreement that it was good then, and I think it stays good from a nostalgia standpoint.
Like I said, I'm looking at it from how we're going to create the character of Mr. Man, and in terms of that, looking at Vince now, like yes, it's not the same character that we'd come to hate and love, but it's an important building block. So in that case, I'm like, they were on point of building him instead of just completely turning him and making him immediately a slime ball.
Yeah, I definitely character. I think it's character development done the right way, and when done like this, you can have a huge payoff. And you'll hear me talk about this a lot. I love the wrestling. Wrestling in the ring is absolutely essential. You have to be good in the ring, but also how you develop that character. You can put on 5-star matches, but if no one cares about you, then you're not gonna work here anymore, so to speak. And we've seen that.
They find ways to work around guys with handicaps. I mean, they had Kali on the roster for years, and that guy could. Andre in his declining years, and they worked around him for so long that, to a degree, they owed Andre a lot. So it's a little unfair comparison, but if they have someone with a look and a size, they do tend to be more forgiving. Like if you're my height and you can't do triple flip, they probably don't want to see me.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to lead into segment 2, and this is we're going to have fun talking about this. Dan the Beast Severn with James E. Cornette versus Flash Funk. This is the first time we're seeing the Beast on Raw as a wrestler, and he is the NWA World Champion since defeating Chris Candido. No gimmicks needed, in February of 1995. And then Cornette carries with him several UFC belts that he's also won, Super Fight Champion. And then essentially Severn grounds Funk and tries to hyperextend his elbow with a cross arm breaker. Funk finds the ropes before that happens. He corners Severn and starts shoulder butts, but Severn drops him to the mat, trying to slap him around because punching down with bare knuckles can break your knuckles, says Cornette. He throws Funk away with a suplex. He throws Funk away with a suplex, but then charges into a spinning heel kick, another suplex by Severn, and he grabs an MMA armbar to make Funk tap. What are your thoughts?
Okay, well, number one, yeah, the MMA armbar. It's not an armbar. He had him in a variation of the key lock, also Americana. There's a couple other different names for it. Basically, it's a shoulder and elbow lock. The armbar is a straight hyperextension of the elbow. But we see even today with Ronda Rousey, they modify what the actual move should be and call them by different names. But regardless, yeah, they're building him up as a shoot fight killer, and trying to get it across in kayfabe is really tough because it's like, you got to say, well, our shit's fake, but this guy's real. And there's no better person to like do this than I can think of two people on the planet that can make this real. One of them is currently doing it for a very parallel gimmick. Paul Heyman as the advocate of Brock Lesnar. In this case, we have James E. Cornette as the advocate for Dan the Beast Severn. I
love Cornette. So good.
He works his ass off to get his guy over.
Oh,
he never wants. The problem you see with modern managers is that they'll talk about a lot of different things and try to get themselves and try to get a lot of different things. Dan Severn looked like the most legit threat on the roster. He calls out in roundabout ways, calls out both Cactus Jack and Stone Cold. It's like, if you guys are really the toughest guys on this roster, come step up to the
called out Ken Shamrock too. Yeah.
And it called out Ken Shamrock as well.
I loved how Cornette, I love how Severn and Cornette come out with all of those titles, which, looking back on it now, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Because it reminds me of when Kurt Angle won all of TNA's titles and was just like, yeah, he's a legit badass.
Lance Storm in WCW.
Oh, the Saskatchewan hardcore title? Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, like 6. He started handing them out to his
primetime Elix Skipper. Yeah.
I started giving him to Elix Skipper, and who's the guy with the Canadian Destroyer? A little flippy dude guy. He was big in TNA. I'm sorry, I forget his name.
Yeah, but no, I thought it was good for getting him over. He didn't. It's not that he did much. But it was the little things. It was the slaps when he's on the ground. Good heel heat. It was clear that he's just some bruising dick that is come to bully people around. I mean, what did you think?
I think it would have been. I think if marketed right, he could have been a good mid card to high up into at least main event. If not, I mean, I don't think he'd win the title, but I think he could have had a good run against Stone. A good point with Stone Cold, instead of just fighting Triple H, The Rock, and Undertaker over and over again along with Vince. And he could have been an interesting guy to throw into that mix if you built him right. He comes across as a good mid-card bully, just a real tough guy isn't taking shit. And I think they squandered. I don't think they understood what the UFC was. It was so early. UFC had been around 5 years at that point, and they still didn't know what the hell it was about. And Vince definitely had no idea. Just he knew the guy was a trained pro wrestler. He's an NWA champion. He was a legit amateur background. He did this fighting thing.
Yeah,
that was kind of sort of at a brief moment of popularity around this point.
But the fact that we never saw a Ken Shamrock versus Dan Severn in their prime seems wrong to me.
It absolutely is, and that they dropped the ball on that. I think it's a lot just between the two guys. Same kind of similar background, but Ken looked better. Ken had a more marketable, natural personality. He's kind of the loose cannon crazy guy, which he really kind of is.
Yeah.
And Dan is not the most exciting person. It's all talk in the ring. So it's understandable why they went with one guy, because even they can work in his shoot background while also accentuating what he is as a pro wrestler. That body, that mentality, that personality he gave off.
Yeah, it really, looking back on it, because I remember when Dan Severn, wrestled, and I caught some of these matches, heard about him, all that other stuff. I wasn't impressed, but maybe I'm just looking at it with different eyes now. And well, I know I am. I'm looking at it with different eyes. And I like him. I marked out hard for him, and it wasn't just because like, oh, hey, you have this former UFC guy. Like it was the Cornette. It was the guy comes across as being a badass, and I felt disappointed that nothing ever came of it. I felt that we got shafted on it. So, and I'm surprised that I felt like that because I anticipated that I was going to hate him. You know,
it's everything was set there to be something, and they never did anything with it. Not to overlook also, Flash Funk, aka Two Cold Scorpios, in this match, an innovator for his time, kind of regulated to be a bit of a jobber here, which you see a lot more jobber type matches in this era than you do in the modern day, which is a bit of a take back in terms of showcase matches where someone gets squashed. Definitely have their place, but you see it a lot more here. And now it's like almost a treat when they the local indie jobber guy comes in and gets squashed by one of the superstars.
Yeah.
Not that Flash Funk was a local jobber. I mean, he was a name wrestler, but he was basically in this position to put Dan over.
Yeah, and I thought the choice of having Flash Funk do it was interesting, and I think it was to the detriment because Flash Funk was not a kind of a resident talent in WWF, and so I thought they should have put him up against a bigger face.
No, he was a contracted talent.
Well, no. What I guess what I meant by that was not being. He was only hired recently, and so he hadn't had a chance to really establish himself. I would have preferred had they put him against, if they want to really establish him as this heel bully, put him against a more popular babyface that's sort of wallowing in like mid-card status, and then have him do that. But I think they just wanted to do a regular job bout, and Flash Funk raised his hand. That's kind of what I think would have improved this was maybe have him go against a stronger face.
He showed up and they said like, hey, he looked at the docket and saw like, hey, you're losing to Dan Severn in 3 minutes. That's your job, man. What's he gonna say about it? He ain't Shawn Michaels. He ain't Triple H. He ain't Stone Cold. Like, no, you show up, you get told you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose.
Yeah, exactly. So.
I rate this a solid B, and mostly for Cornette. Cornette is on announcing. He joins the announce team during this match too, so we hear a lot of Cornette. We hear a lot of talking about his great amateur and fighting pedigrees. Of course, Jim Ross joins right in because nothing Jim Ross loves more than a legitimate athlete.
Yeah, I give it a same grade. I give it a B, and I give as many A+ as you can possibly give to Jim Cornette for putting over his talent and putting over himself as a manager. Love that shit. I miss having him in wrestling or someone like him in wrestling. Apart from Heyman.
They're two of the best that ever did it, as far as I'm concerned. This will bring us into maybe a little different opinion here. Segment 3. DX is going to come out and cut a promo. This is the new branded DX. At WrestleMania, they brought the New Age Outlaws into the fold, and the week before this, Sean Waltman, aka X-Pac, aka Six, aka 123 Kid, whatever you want to call him,
X-Pac, who came to rip ass all over the WWF, whatever that means.
He had defected to WCW, was part of the NWO, and now had defected back. Crying and complaining about mistreatment from Eric Bischoff and claiming the Hall and Nash were held hostage under contract. And this would that part of the storyline would come in a few weeks later. But right now, it's just DX coming out and just giving a promo about how badass they are, and being subversive and going against the grain of what wrestling was at the time. People just didn't do this stuff back then. And I think I have to remember that through my nostalgia glasses. But at the same time, I mean, I thought the promo was overall pretty damn cheesy, but the crowd's
hold on. You didn't like when Helmsley said that his bazooka is locked, cocked, and ready to unload? I got 2 words for you. Suck it.
I mean, at the time that was groundbreaking. You look back at it, it's like kind of tame, if not very juvenile, and there was better writing came along. I would almost say this has Russo's fingerprints on it, but I can't even be sure because DX was kind of known for this kind of thing back then.
Yeah, and I think we should mention that after the break, DX bullies some people. There's some stagehand backstage, and then they start spray painting DX on stuff too.
Right, this is part of the whole connection. The Wolfpack and the DX kind of mirroring each other because they were all friends, and there's a lot of inside jokes between each other. So I mean, it's if you're watching this, looking at the inside ball of it, this is it makes sense.
So I can understand where you sort of see the cheesy aspects, but
I mentioned the word click. We're talking about the click here.
Yeah, we're talking about the click. Yeah, but no, I can see where somebody would kind of see that stuff comes off as cheesy, but I think at the time it was definitely revolutionary, like sort of the shoot aspect of it, and then also what they were really doing was they were channeling kind of some of the things that NWO was doing, where you're just like causing chaos. So as far as the ring promo, I enjoyed it. I gave it B plus A, just from an entertainment value. But what I really liked was so when they go backstage and they start beating up this stagehand, I didn't really like that, except for one specific part that I totally went apeshit over. And it's when they put a 55-gallon drum on top of the guy. Okay, so they got this little guy. He's underneath the 55-gallon drum. And then Billy Gunn spray paints like a smiley face or something on the drum, and then like DX. Meanwhile, X-Pac is banging the drum as if it's like a bongo and singing like a Jamaican guy. And I thought that was hilarious.
So much fucking fun on the show. Nothing else. Sean Waltman is overjoyed. Like it's like you can tell the difference between. He obviously wasn't having a good time in WCW before this, and they basically let him run free with his buddy and a couple other ne'er-do-wells, and he is having a blast. That is infectious. I'll give you that. Sean Waltman is infectious.
Yeah, and the other thing that I will notice about DX is I'm surprised at how quickly the new members gelled into it. And I know down the road, the New Age Outlaws had a lot of bad things to say about HBK and Triple H, but at this time they just joined.
They were all on the same page. They were good friends.
Yeah.
But again, DX weren't part of that clique, and eventually it did kind of edge them out because they just weren't OGs. And once the fun was over, Triple H because Triple H just moved on, like so far from everybody else. Like I mean, I can imagine the bitterness of that situation, where you're on top of the world one day, and next thing you're second-rate lackeys.
Yeah, it's like somebody who's the lead singer of a really, really famous band, and then they want to strike out on their own and release a solo album, and it's like, yeah, but what about us? And it's like, well, frankly, you guys aren't good enough to do it on your own, you know?
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Not every situation is Van Halen. A lot of times you lose that singer, you lose the band.
Yeah.
Bands just come back to it. So I give it a C+. A lot of it's because it's mostly enjoyable, but yeah, some of the line, it's just so they're capable of better material, I'd say. But I do kind of appreciate the chaos they're creating, as you said. I kind of like watching X-Pac just obviously kind of off script doing his own thing, which is kind of fun to watch. And for that reason alone, I bump it up to a C+.
Yeah, and I give it a I give the in-ring promo a B+. I give the backstage segment
you really enjoyed it a lot
B+.
more than
Yeah, I give the backstage segment a B+, and I give X-Pac A's across the board.
Yeah, I agree with that, because he is just having fun, and sometimes you just enjoy when you watch someone just having fun in wrestling. It's like the best moment. Like when Cactus Jack got one over on The Rock and said it doesn't matter what something, well, it gets the crowd with it. Like it's totally just having fun. To the Rock is trying to be serious in the ring and keep his composure. He just starts laughing, starts running around the ring chanting his own name, and the crowd starts chanting along to the point where the Rock can't even keep his composure. He just starts laughing because it's so genuine. And I think I kind of get that feeling from Pac during this whole thing because he's just having fun.
So what we can say with all honesty right now, and this is going to be controversial, is that after watching this episode, in a vacuum, X-Pac is our favorite member of DX.
Just weird to say. He is the standout star and all. And there's a lot going on here. And DX is not our first time or last time seeing DX on this show.
It's kind of weird.
It is, considering the person who coined the term X-Pac heat.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we get to segment 4. And segment 4 is Steve Blackman versus Brian Christopher. Ross puts over that Blackman has only one pinfall loss in his WWF career, and that is to Jeff Jarrett.
That is a throwback. Really caring about wins and losses.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally see it, like until they just stop caring about it. Like Austin, you're putting a guy over by win streak.
Yeah, exactly. Tennessee Lee, he comes out and joins JR and Cole, and the big surprise he promised last week is Sawyer Brown will join Jeff Jarrett to do backup vocals at Unforgiven, and then yada, yada, yada. There's a bunch of other stuff that Tennessee Lee says that I'm sure we are going to critique. And then Blackman goes in and has a squash match against Brian Christopher, beats the hell out of him. What do you think?
Well, it's Brian Christopher far and away charismatic in this match. Not that, that's a low bar to get over for sure. Steve Blackman is devoid of any charisma. Great martial artist, fine ring technician. There's no ring technician, but he was a guy with no personality. He's the son of one of the greatest promos of all time, who was not a bad promo himself, full of courage. Jerry's kid chanted at him, kind of a badly secret. He was the son of Jerry Long point. The point that he even addresses the crowd. So yeah, Jerry's kid, get it. And you have Tennessee Lee, which I just did with his character. But I enjoyed a lot, basically pre-Too Cool here. A lot of stuff he would eventually incorporate into that gimmick, but for right now he's just a little jobber on Raw. But I had more fun watching him than anything else at this segment.
Yeah, it's like the way he walks, the way he laughs. I mean, he really has the heel mannerisms down, but he's like a cartoon character out there. Yeah.
Memphis style. I grew up with Memphis. I get where he's coming from. It's a little different than you, and it's something that could get over pretty good if pushed correct. My opinion.
Yeah, and I mean he's not bad in the ring, but one thing I noticed about Blackman is his his look is impressive, right?
The guy looks like $1 million.
Oh God, yeah. And
they hit him with Ken.
Yeah, and he did not do a single wrestling move until towards the end. I think he did a suplex or something. It was all kicks and leg sweeps. I just remember watching this and being okay, but what if they had taught him to be a wrestler too? What if yeah, that was his gimmick, but he also did other things. He just seemed to be so one-dimensional in that he could do the kicks and he could go in and be a badass.
By a Paul Heyman, Jim Cornette.
Yeah.
The amount of piece that gets him over is just one of the baddest motherfuckers that ever existed. Could have done with him, but just have to cover up the fact that he can't. He has no charisma.
No, doesn't it? And he did. He would give a promo a few weeks later, and it was just very forced. It wasn't good. So I mean.
It has to be a great promo. That's why we need managers back.
Yeah, very true.
The Midnight Express can't talk for shit. You don't remember that at all, right? Why? Because their mouthpiece was Jim Cornette.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I noticed with this match is that when Jeff Jarrett came out, so number one, I thought the structure was really weird.
The match, Blackman puts him in a weird ass. I go back and look at what it actually is. I think it's a shoulder lock, is what it eventually. Basically, like an arm breaker or an STF move. It's a shoulder breaker.
But what I thought it was weird when Tennessee Lee is down there at the announcer table, okay, and then he leaves, okay, and then he comes back with Jeff Jarrett, and so it's like, dude, why did you come down to begin with?
Managing both, right? They're all Memphis people, all three of these guys, right? So I'm thinking he was Brian Christopher here, but he just kind of threw him to the fucking wolves.
Oh, okay. Well, that could be it.
Because it makes sense. He came down with Brian Christopher. They're both Memphis boys, and Memphis boy comes down. I think it's a whole Memphis thing going on here. Again, we're watching backing a bit, but I think he's Brian Christopher. In comments, tell me if I'm wrong. But he was Brian Christopher's manager as well.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't catch that. I just thought it was really weird how that got structured, and then Jeff Jarrett came down. Oh my God, I hate this Jeff Jarrett. I like WCW Jeff Jarrett.
I'm amused by this one for, I talked to you about notes I sent you, just what a weird artifact guitar became. This is like the last era where it actually made sense that he had a guitar.
Yeah, so talk to me about that, because you're right. I mean, he started out as a country western singer.
He was the son of the promoter, but he was over. He took that style, baby. To WWE, he had the country music game. He had brought in the roadie, aka Road Dogg. Turns out it was like during the Milli Vanilli controversy. Turns out Road Dogg was the guy who actually sung the song.
Right.
So he leaves for a bit, and now he's coming back, still doing the gimmick, but it would quickly be dropped after this. But his stealing the Honky Tonk Man's gimmick of guitars would stay the rest of his career. Well, after he had any kind of music gimmick, which just becomes like a artifact. If you might wonder yourself, why is this guy hitting people with a guitar? And it goes back to this, but just one of those things that kind of got dropped, but the guitar stayed.
Yeah, and had it not been for Jeff Jarrett and Tennessee Lee, we would not have the New Age Outlaws.
And correct in a way, Billy Gunn's involved in that too. That's all a weird little concoction of what ended up happening. Overall, I give this segment a C. I don't like Tennessee Lee. He was a good character. I like a lot. The angle with the guitar smashing Blackman at the end.
I give it a C. Is this something that I'm interested in seeing next week? No. That's kind of all I have to say about it. Maybe it should be lower, but it is what it is.
For historical, it's him with when the field you see Jeff Jarrett with a guitar where it makes sense. It's kind of the footnote to this whole thing to me.
Yeah.
So, what segment are we on
now? 5.
Now, here's if you're truly a fan of the Attitude Era, it's like, who wore DOA? And but based on what I said is what happened. They went out, they were a biker gang. They're supposed to be like a 1%er gang, biker gang, whatever. Slight hints toward power, which is kind of squirmy. But
it's
Road Dogg and X-Pac pee on their bikes, and that's the segment.
I hated it.
It was fucking awful. This is a D-.
Yeah, it's an F for me. They start with the
Road Dogg says some funny shit, so that's why I have it at a D-.
Yeah, I mean, they started with the original DX promo, and you're like, okay, cool, and then so quickly go back to this segment, and then I don't think it plays well. I thought it was goofy, and at the end of the day, like, and I'll talk more about DOA and my thoughts on that, but DOA was supposed to be an equivalent faction. You had the Nation, you had DOA, you had Los Boricuas, and you had
through this era, but they were a jobber faction.
Yeah, but they were trying to around this time do the whole gang wars, which I like. I like that idea. Some people don't, but I like that idea. But DOA was just bad.
They basically they're all buddies with a certain wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
You guess who said wrestler was? If you don't know,
Undertaker.
The whole all those biker dudes in pro wrestling all hang out together. They don't push themselves like a DX clique kind of group, but being the Undertaker and WWF probably wasn't a bad thing in the late '90s.
Well, they were all part of the Bone Street Crew, which Undertaker has like the BSK tattoo.
BSK, yep. Along with
Fatu.
It was like white bikers and Samoans. It was a weird gang. It was like Yokozuna was a member of it all.
Yeah, so you had Fatu, who became Rikishi. You had Yoko. Brian Adams. You had I think Ron and Don Harris were like loose members. Midian was in there, who was Phineas. And who else?
DOA Chronic, LOD, hung with him at times as well. It's the later LOD DOA hookup. So it was like a lot of white bikers and a lot of Samoans and this weird faction that probably could have pushed more muscle than they did, but it wasn't Taker's style, and he obviously ran them. With at one point Yokozuna probably being his VP. If you want to get into biker terminology here.
Yeah.
Two guys you wouldn't mess with, right?
Yeah, I just thought it was bad. Yeah, that's it. I don't really want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, well, we have more DOA coming up, so just keep that in mind.
So,
let's get on a high note here.
Yeah.
I'll let you start off with this.
So segment,
aka Cactus Jack's promo.
Yeah. So segment 6, Cactus Jack. We come back to Raw from a commercial. Cactus Jack come down to the ring wearing a neck collar due to the abuse he suffered from last week on Raw against the New Age Outlaws in a cage match. He sits in a chair in the ring to put over what pain he's in, and he's pissed off at DX for putting him out of business. Terry Funk must be pretty hurt because he isn't returning his phone calls and seems like he's gone. And then Cactus puts over Terry as the greatest old bastard ever, and he wanted. What's that?
Ultra.
Mm-hmm. And he's pissed off because, after getting his ass beat, all fans want to do is chant Steve Austin, and he feels slighted by that. And he goes on talking about all of the bumps he's taken, all the pain he's puts himself through, and he's like, it doesn't seem to be worth it anymore. And then he walks out and says, "This is probably the last time you'll see Cactus Jack." And what'd you think?
I said, if there's like a promo tape they show down at WWE Developmental, I hope this promo's on there because it deserves to be. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
Because not only does not only does he explain why he's pissed off, but he does it the same way as like, I'm not mad. It's Steve. Me and Steve are old buddies, which was absolutely true. The next year, Mick Foley would release his book, which would describe like him, Steve Regal and Diamond Dallas Page were all running buddies in their WCW days. So he's like, no, I have no problem with Steve, but I have a problem with the fans, not respecting me enough to give me my time before you start chanting Stone Cold. It's an honest shoot point. He probably was a little miffed about it. It wasn't just a kayfabe thing, but he turned it into a storyline. He made it so believable, so organic. He had that crowd in the palm of his hand, and he didn't do shit other than take off a neck brace.
Yeah. Totally agree.
A plus.
Totally agree. I give it A+. One of the better, if not, top 10 promos of all time. I mean, that's a tough bill. If you were gonna pick, 3 or 4 Mick Foley promos that really I guess sum up. Yeah, it's up there.
Doing.
Yeah, it is. It is. I thought it was great, and it definitely gets him the sympathy, but it does it in a way that is not forced. It comes off as real, and it's a good.
It gives you the choice of like, you're a bitter asshole, and I want, because they're about to turn him heel here. He's going to go corporate, but at the same time, the fans who still are fans of him will still cheer him, and they're playing him as a tweener here, and he's one of the few guys who can do it.
Yeah, and when I watched this promo, the first thing that I thought of was, imagine if they did something like this with a Roman Reigns, for instance, where, you know, he gets the shit kicked out of him day in, day out.
He's that so many times and never followed through.
Right. And I think something like this could work for him, especially after the Brock Lesnar beatdown, where everyone's just like, yeah, hit him with another one. We hope you die. And instead, he pursues that character of, no, I'm not mad at the fans. Like, he's very...
Gotta sell that merch, brother.
Yeah, so...
I think John Cena never turn heel, because they ain't fucking up merchandise. That's a lot of money, bro. I get it.
Well,
I don't say I agree with it, but I get it.
Well, if you ever go to a WWF house show or WWE house show, you'll notice that, you know, it's impossible not to buy Roman Reigns or the Shield merch, because that's kind of like all they have. I wanted a Seth Rollins shirt.
The thing is, every boy under 12, my son loves Roman Reigns and the Shield. Like, they're absolutely his favorite guys, and he doesn't. He acknowledges it. Like, there's people who don't like him. He don't get it at all. But that's his age, how he's viewing it. And every other little, like, you go to those house shows, you know, every little boy under 10, 11 years old has a freaking Reigns shirt, a Dean Ambrose shirt, or a Seth Rollins shirt, or a Shield shirt.
Yeah.
And you can't deny that. I mean, they play a very weird game. Back then, in this era, and this is part I give Russo credit again. Russo definitely had a little part in this. He said, hey, go a little, because he was always big on the shoots. He's like, I guarantee you, he was like, shoot a little on this. Make it a storyline, but put a little shoot in it, and that's exact. And who better to do it than Mick Foley?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like I thought it was great. Really was.
I can't. This is an absolute perfect segment.
All right, lead us into segment 6.
Yeah, we have interesting point here in 1998. The Rock IC champion versus the Blackheart, Owen Hart. Owen Hart, the last standing member of the Hart Foundation after the screw job from Survivor Series year prior, right before he joins the Nation himself, I believe. If you've looked into that, I can't remember the timeline on this, but I know it was pretty soon after this Owen joined them as a token white dude.
I believe it was, yeah.
Starts off with they went really out of the way to say, like, hey, the Nation filmed this themselves and switched off the cameras. Here they are beating up Farouk, a.k.a. Ron Simmons. Basically, they're kicking him out as leader. Rock was taking over. This is part of Rock's rocket ship rise to being one of the biggest guys in the company. Like, you can't really tell it here. He seems like a solid mid-card heel, but he is about to strap a rocket to his ass at this point.
Yeah, I just opened it up. It's Budweiser time. So when I watched this, what I was really interested in was 2 things. The first thing was that Owen Hart, when he got injured, a little bit before this, and I think it was when he was before he came back, like reunited with Bret Hart. He was actually doing a little bit of like an Austin anti-establishment, anti-authority sort of gimmick, and I really liked it. And then it never really went anywhere, and now he's sort of wallowing in this mid-card territory. And so I thought, number one, this match didn't really elevate him. And I think that's unfortunate. It didn't really elevate him. And then around this time, I just don't think that they knew what to do with him. And then they're like, all right, we'll put you in the Nation of Domination, later on. But as far as The Rock goes, he was really working his different catchphrases, and you can see that you're already seeing different variations, and then they would get tweaked over time. But
so he's doing all these as a cocky, all the stuff that you would eventually get cheered for. Finally The Rock is back in your stupid little town. Feel lucky. That babyface thing. At this point, it's just him being a dick.
Yeah. Overall, though, I would say that I kind of give this maybe a C, and the reason for it was I really hated how it ended. Where I was somewhat enjoying the match and I wanted to see more. I think it ended at 5:46, and then China comes in and whacks Owen with the bat across the shoulders to signal the DQ. And I thought that was bullshit because you have Owen Hart, who's a fantastic wrestler from a great family, and then gets taken out by China. Get it? China's the muscle of DX, as weird as that sounds.
Well, looking at the storyline, this probably would put him on the path to join. Like, he's got DX against him. He needs to team up with a group. And so it makes sense storyline-wise where they're going with this. But, yeah, I see what you're saying. As a standalone segment, it's like we got robbed of a really good match that could have gone on 3 or 4 more minutes.
Well, and why have China do it?
Because she was currently involved in the feud with Owen Hart and whoever else it was involved. Like, she was the main instigator in this feud. Yeah.
Maybe I have to look at it a little bit with a different view, but that really irked me when I saw that.
The B-, like I said, I'm so fascinated watching The Rock do all this Rock stuff before he was The Rock. Owen Hart and just having a great little match, and Rock doing what he does. Rock does like 5 moves. The Rock does 5 moves very fucking well. Owen can do about anything. So fun match. Footage of Farouk without a mustache, no bueno. That's an F.
Chat me up on D'Lo Brown. What do you think?
D'Lo Brown's one of the most underrated performers I can think of from that era. Like, just a guy who never got a fair shake. Could have done a main event run. Just various things, man. Like he just, not even the draw stuff has nothing to do with it really. It's just they just never could quite figure out what to. They knew they had something with D'Lo, and while they had him, they kept him as a fairly stable mid card guy. Euro, Intercontinental. He held both titles, Euro and Intercontinental titles at the same time. Among other things, he had this great personality. He had this, he was such a fantastic chicken shit heel in the ring when he was being a chicken shit heel. But yeah, they just never knew what to do with him. He went to be a producer in TNA, and I think he still works backstage there. And now that they're global, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and 2 of the prettiest moves, being the lowdown and then the sky high, 2 of the prettiest moves that I've ever seen, and smooth in how he delivered them.
He reminds me a lot of Kevin Owens, actually.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. Yeah, certainly not the talker of Kevin Owens, but just in the ring, there's goodness there, and
it's the fact he's always in character. No matter what he's doing, he is fully being that guy.
Right.
Kevin is fantastic at it. That's why him and Jericho work so well together. They're both on the same page of that. Every single movement, every single thing you say is part of the storyline. And D'Lo was really good at that, especially when he was a heel.
Yeah.
And then, I think he's totally underrated. But back to the mustache. Ron Simmons, my fellow Georgia boy, Heisman Trophy nominee, true badass on the planet, dude you never want to mess with. Never should shave his mustache, ever. He just looks wrong. I can't handle it.
Yeah, I really, because I remember I hated Farouk when he was leader of the nation, and then they tried to work him as a face, and then I just think it kind of stalled. They just didn't really, they lost interest or what have you. But
it took the wrestling patriarchy 30 years to figure out what the fuck to do with Ron Simmons. It was apparently being a badass tag team of card players.
Yeah,
you just have to say one word every once in a while.
Yeah, and they were great. They were great as the APA. Got Bradshaw his start because when he came in, he was Blackjack Bradshaw and then Justin Hawk Bradshaw, and then he'd eventually become JBL.
Yeah, he became best buddies with one of the toughest guys in the locker room, so he can get away with a lot of his bullshit too. But that's a story for another day as well. It helps to be a bully when one of your best friends is one of the toughest guys in the locker room, but I digress. Fake fucking tough guy, Bradshaw. I got a lot of things to say. Anyway.
So what are we on to? Segment 7, I think you're up.
So now we've entered the war zone. This is a different era. This is a very... To go back in time, they created... the 2 hours of Raw were 2 separate shows, and it was done for Nielsen ratings purposes. They had a very specific divide of the show between Warzone and Raw's War. And here we have not only a different entrance, the copyrights change over, and the announcing changes over. We switch out Michael Cole for Jerry the King Lawler, who we have not seen through the first hour, which just, as a longtime Raw fan, just felt weird. And they would eventually start merging the shows together, and it would actually take 3 or 4 years after the end of the Monday Night Wars and the death of Nitro to finally make Raw one show again. So very interesting to see this weird little copyright tidbit going on, and it's also good to hear the King again. So we go right into this is the segment where Austin comes out in the suit, correct?
Yeah, Vince McMahon comes to the ring and he has 2 policemen who are basically statues. I don't know what their purpose was.
Local indie guys is what they are.
Local indie guys, yeah.
They're usually easy to spot because they don't look like actual policemen would ever look. They have weird facial hair, giant, they're super bulky or fat, or they're wearing the wrong uniform for the area. All sorts of weird stuff like that. Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention with Jerry Lawler, this is the height of King sucking up to Vince McMahon as the heel commentator, which is delightful. He's such a fucking suck-up piece of shit. You forget the great heel. Jerry Lawler can do face or heel as well as anybody and switch without fucking blinking.
Now, was he in there? Help me remember this. Was he in there with Jim Ross at this time?
Him and JR, and they're having a good old time. JR's giving him shit. Anytime you hear Jim Ross drop a line on Jerry and you don't hear anything for 5 seconds, it's because Jerry Lawler is laughing his ass off. Something JR just trashed him about.
So they just swapped out Michael Cole then.
Yes. Thank God.
Yeah.
So this whole segment is Vince is bringing down Austin. He's wearing an Armani suit with a salmon tie. Gotta love that. But he's they point out the fact that he's wearing his wrestling boots, which is a good kind of foreshadow to what's going to happen. He points out, you're not wearing your Gucci's. It's oh, they weren't comfortable, Vince. I just put on my wrestling boots to be comfortable. And he takes his, and not to badmouth the merchandise, he's yes, it's a very fine hat, but it doesn't match the suit, and he throws the hat into the crowd. that was good. That was a cheap plug, and I liked it. You mentioned in your recording that they probably sold a lot of hats after that. Absolutely. Fantastic. And Vince wasn't going to trash the hat. He's I'm selling this motherfucker. So, but not matching the suit. And they go through just the rigmarole of Austin trying to play along the good corporate champion. Crowd's not buying any of this. They know what's going to happen, and it's something that should happen. And Austin eventually shows okay, you want to talk a little bit about Austin versus the camera? Did you notice this? When Austin turns around and he's looking at the camera? No, when he's pulling the disposable camera out of his suit jacket. Oh, I remember that. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was. And he's like, yeah, you want to take a picture and everything like that. Since I don't have a selfie stick. Vince, can I get a picture of me and you with the belt together? And he gives it to one of the jabronis. But him and that camera fight for 30 seconds where he just keeps talking and covers it. I can't get this goddamn thing out of my pocket.
I missed that. I forgot about that one. Yeah, it was pretty funny, and then randomly, like, he starts like taking off his pants, and he's like, when he started taking off his clothes, I was like, I don't know, man, this is kind of weird. And then he's in his trunks.
He was smoother taking off his pants, and I was like waiting for like a major fuck up, and he managed to get those pants off just fine. So
yeah.
But Vince is like holding the microphone for him as he's like pulling his pants off and yelling at Vince. Vince is like holding the mic under his mouth, like, make sure we get all of this. Even though it's a funny, awkward moment, but it only works because it's Vince and Austin in there, and they can cover while they have to like get over some awkward moments.
Right, and Jim Ross makes the great statement: rattlesnakes don't make corporate pets.
Yeah.
And
another thing, going back to when JR and Cole were announcing the first hour, JR is basically being color and letting Cole do play-by-play, and he's a great color man. Actually, he's not over the top. You know, he keeps his credibility, but he gets to put up a little bit of his personality in there, and I enjoyed JR as a color commentator personally.
Oh yeah, and the other thing is, instead of stunning him, the fact that he like takes a picture of him, you know, he hits him in the balls, and then he gets like a picture of it. I thought that was so great, you know.
No, this segment is great. This segment's A-, easy. This is the Stone Cold McMahon rivalry like hitting its peak.
Oh yeah, definitely.
These guys play this up so well. The only thing missing is the Stooges. They weren't quite in the picture yet.
No, not quite in the picture, but I think either next Raw or a couple Raws from now, you are going to get that infamous Vince McMahon versus Stone Cold episode where the entire episode is like, I think it might be one of the best Raws of all time, where you're prepping for this match, and Vince is learning how to, you know, Gerald Briscoe's teaching him how to, like, you know, grab a leg and all this other stuff, and then
when he does the setup for the stunner, he always does the kick to the gut. So what you need to do is block. Yeah, honest kayfabe wrestling advice. So I absolutely love it. I would love to review that. Actually.
Will I fight Stone Cold? Oh hell yeah!
I don't know if it's as good as him with Shane McMahon and with the chicken in the snow, but it's pretty good.
But yeah, I'm right with you there. I give it an A-. I thought it was great. It continues the rivalry, but does it in a way where Vince still is not a full heel. He seems to just be someone who's out of touch.
Kayfabe, he's pretending he's not a heel. He knows he's a heel. I mean, in real life, he knows what
he yeah. He knows.
The character is still pretending like I'm trying to be like the even-handed overseer of WWF.
Right.
But everyone knows he's a slimy piece of shit. He kind of broke it, I think, a little bit before this, like where he went off on like the WWF, like one of their local interviewers on Raw came up and interviewed him, and he like got pissed off and just said, "Give me that mic, it's my mic, it's my camera. Stop this shit." And like he pulled all the shit out of their hand. It was like the first time I think he really acknowledged who he was on camera. I think it predates us by about a month. But that's also a part of that whole setup of here comes the villain, Mr. McMahon, not the announcer, Vince McMahon.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that I noticed that I really liked was his approach. He was always respectful to the fans, but then he would do a glance where like, no, you guys don't get it. Like,
you don't know what's good for you.
You're not smart enough.
Right.
Yeah.
It was always condescending. It's like, you don't know what you like. I know what you want to see. Just trust in Uncle Vince, and everything will be all right.
Yeah, and I love the segment. I think it's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Austin McMahon, and this is so early in the thing. So I'm looking at your notes here. I'm like, anything we made that point. Okay. Stone Cold don't change for nobody. That's the bottom line.
Ooh, the other thing that I did want to mention was this angle taps into an innate desire that most Americans have. Most Americans hate their job, and they would love the chance to just do whatever the hell they want and just shove it down their boss's throat. And that was the true appeal of this. And they just happen to find the exact perfect foils to carry it out. But you can see this, man. Like, the crowd is just going ape shit because they're like, I work my ass off, and I got a boss who's like this, who treats me like shit and wants me to be something else.
Remember this point, he's double speaking. He's the real rattlesnake. You want to get into I'm a film major at college right now, so I get into film theory. We can talk about who the actual rattlesnake here is, and it's not Stone Cold.
What do we got? The next one. So we both marked out hard for that, rightfully so.
I can't complain about early Austin McManus. It's beautiful. Austin wasn't quite Austin yet. He still had some refining to do to really get that character out.
Segment 8.
Vince did do it, obviously. So next, segment 8. Ken Shamrock versus Marvelous Mark.
No. We got segment 8 is Luna with Goldust
over that. I'm sorry, yeah.
versus Matt Knowles. And this is a squash match. Goldust attacks Knowles before the bell. Gives him a few moves. I got to give a hand for attacking somebody before the bell if you're a heel. Ref just stands there and lets it happen. Knowles is willing to face Luna, though, and she monkey flips Knowles out of the corner and gives him a flying headbutt for the win in 28 seconds. So basically, Goldust beats the hell out of this Matt Knowles jobber guy, and then Luna gets the win. And then we get a Val Venus vignette. What'd you think about both?
The Goldust Luna thing was just kind of there. It's moving forward. Goldust would go on to do a lot more things. I know this is where we differ. I think Luna could have been used a lot more, much more better.
So gross.
Whether or not we think about her aesthetics, she's a great fucking wrestler. She comes from wrestling lineage, who her dad was, who her family was, the Chans. You could have done a lot more with her. I don't know if anything, a run to the top or anything, but she could have had a good longer run than she did. The Val Venus part, so I give the match it's a C plus B minus. The Val Venus thing is so bad. It's just such a talk about your products of your time. If this wasn't 100% written by Vince Russo, I'd fucking eat my hat.
So I give
the guy who plays him, his name just slipped my head.
Sean Morley.
What Sean Morley did with that character is amazing. What he was given to work with is a lot of crap. This gimmick could have been fucked up, and it's only because Sean Morley that it worked.
So I give this entire segment an F. Goldust looks like shit. He's so bad. So fat.
He was high on opioids at this time. I gave him a break for his drug problem.
No, I'm not going to give him a break. So Goldust looks like shit. Luna Vachon is impossible for me to look at. She's so gross. So gross. Her voice, everything. I hate her.
Disagree. I don't think it's that bad.
She might be good at wrestling. I don't want to watch it. Somebody else can pay for it. Matt Knowles, just a guy. And then as far as Val Venus in the ring, like after he debuted.
That was the thing about him. He was a great wrestler.
Yep. After he debuted, when he would come in the ring and he would kind of give his Rick Rude type intros, I enjoyed that, and I forgot about the debut vignettes and everything like that.
What was the movie he's parodying when he's talking there? As Hard as It Gets. He's parodying Jack Nicholson, who just won the Oscar for As Good as It Gets, and he's doing As Hard as It Gets.
Terrible.
Terrible.
The thing that really bothers me about the vignette is not what he's saying. It's that every time after he says something, he interrupts it with this cheesy laugh, and then he sucks in like he's getting blown off. and it really, really bothers me. It makes me uncomfortable.
It was a very early, like, the character would get better refined, and this is like in any other era, this would be like one of the shittiest fucking debuts I can think of.
Yeah. But
it only worked here because it was so outrageous.
So I think what we agree on, we disagree on Luna. We agree on Goldust sucking. We agree on Matt Knowles being just who Matt Knowles is. And then for Val Venus, we're both in agreement that debuted Val Venus was pretty good, but these vignettes were awful. They don't age well.
Side note, the best feud he ever did was against Rikishi. They had a blood fucking feud on SmackDown 4 or 5 years after this. That was like the best thing he ever did. They completely dropped all that. Both of their silly gimmicks were dropped just for these two guys having a really entertaining blood feud, which is like I think kind of forgotten in modern years. But maybe we can look at that in the future. Yeah,
and he's a big dude. I forgot how big he was. Like his back, massive.
I think he's a producer now backstage, isn't he?
I'm not sure. I know he had a cup of coffee in TNA back when they were going to rekindle the Monday Night Wars, and we know how that went. That's kind of the last I saw him. Yeah.
And now on to segment 9. Kind of interesting stuff going on here. If you ever think of like just a match that screams 1998, how about Ken Shamrock versus Marvelous Mark Merritt? How's that strike you? Oh, with Sable.
Yeah, it really does. And this is like, so when Mark Merrow first came into WWF, he wasn't that bad. I mean, he had the TKO, and this is when they first started introducing Sable. But we're talking now bit later.
She's already over. Like,
she's already over. And Mark Merrow has just dropped down considerably. He looks bad. He does not look in shape.
He just came out of off an injury, I believe. Sable had been on her own for like 6 months while he had a shoulder or elbow surgery or something. Remember, he was Johnny B. Bad in WCW before this, so he's been an experienced wrestler. Instead of playing the flamboyant gay rock musician, he's playing guy who used to box and has a hot wife. I guess that's his character.
Yeah, and I'm not marking out for Sable.
If you get a better idea of what Mark Merrow's character is supposed to be, please tell me.
Yeah, that's about it. It's bad. He's bad. And Sable, I am not marking out for her. I think she kind of looks trampy. And I always remember her being like just the hottest chick ever. But her face...
I was like, I immediately spotted the trend.
She's got like a resting bitch face.
No offense, Brock. I love you, Brock. Like, you guys are a great family. FYI.
Yeah.
No, remember he was Johnny B. Bad. Like he was he entered like the Brawl for All. Like he was a legit badass who like most people just remember as he did a gay gimmick.
Yeah, and it's really hard for me to take Mark Merrow seriously to begin with.
Yeah.
And then when you put him up against Ken Shamrock, it begins to bother me. I get troubled.
Well, I mean, at least in this case, you have a situation of two guys who can honestly fight. Which is interesting if they play up that aspect, which JR, I think, touches on. It's like Ken Shamrock is an ultimate fighting pit fighter, and Mark Merrow is a former Golden Gloves blood. I'm pretty sure my memory is JR does play it up to a degree.
My reaction is, don't care about Golden Gloves. It's just, I hate him. I really do.
I feel that I can't imagine anyone ever felt that strongly about Mark Merrow ever. He's probably appreciative. Most people just didn't care. You actively hate him.
Yeah,
that's a win in the wrestling column.
Yeah, I mean, when Sable initially came out and was like getting all the pops, and then he's like the jealous boyfriend. I'm like, okay, but then when he when he starts going full boxer gimmick, he lost me.
It wasn't good for the character because the guy obviously could make a personality. And they couldn't use the Johnny B. Bad personality because it was copyrighted to WCW, and they couldn't figure out a way to harness his natural charisma and persona into anything.
His Mark Marrow-ness.
Right, because Vince fell in love with Johnny B. Bad. And then when he got Johnny B. Bad, he's like, you can't use that character. And he was like, he had no idea what to do with him. And he was like, he noticed his wife, who was not in the business whatsoever, was like, oh my God, you have like the hottest wife. And that kind of led us to what became Sable and Mark Marrow.
Yeah. This, so I mean, what did you like about this? I mean, what happens?
It's a good back and forth. It really shows off Ken Shamrock. And again, it's the guy, he's a fucking body of a god.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got this legitimate background. He's a real badass.
His trunks and shin pads, the entire getup is great.
Yeah, I mean, he's over too. People kind of know who Dan Severn is, but if you ever heard about Ultimate Fighting at this point, you know who Ken Shamrock is. He was just one of those guys that stood out. And he's a bit over. Like he was the special ref in the Austin Michaels match, right? Oh no, he was the special guest in the Bret Hart a year before this. He's been around a minute.
I don't know. Like there's a couple good suplexes. I'm gonna like anytime I see Ken Shamrock suplex the hell out of somebody, I'm gonna like it. So he's not the problem. Again,
no, like I said, you have two tough guys here, so both of them are willing to take some stiff stuff, and you see that in the match. And it's actually a fairly stiff little match.
It is, but again,
neither one is a great wrestler. No one's really I think Shamrock is leading this, which is weird because Miro has the most experience here, but it looks like Shamrock's leading the match.
So,
what it is.
So here's what I'll say about this match. Okay, well, really quickly, the rundown. There's a blocked Hurricane Rana from Shamrock with a power bomb. Shamrock slips away from the TKO, hits a belly-to-belly suplex. Beautiful. Ken Shamrock has got to have one of the best belly-to-belly suplexes because he does it differently. It's just beautiful. Calls for the ankle lock, and then Nation of Domination ruins everything. DQ at 2:45.
And I'll go along with this with the belly. The reason he does it well is also did the Steiners. Is he's a guy who would just hurt you up and throw you however he wanted to throw you, whether he agreed with it or not. That's why their belly suplexes always look great. Him, Rick, and Scott Steiner.
Yep.
They would just lift you as like, you're going. I don't care if you want to go, you're going to go.
Yeah, and because when you do a belly-to-belly suplex and it doesn't look good, like it really when it's like a gimmick, or when somebody allows you to do a belly-to-belly suplex, it does not look good. But when it's something that's a little bit rougher, man, does it look good. It just is really effective.
It's a legit wrestling move.
Yeah.
Use it in the Olympics. Like, it's a legit move if you can actually muscle someone over to do it. Like, it's impressive. It's badass. And when you look like you're actually, like you said, forcing someone to do it, it's even better.
Yeah, and then, for his troubles, so, Nation Domination comes out. You got a DQ, so another no finish. And then Shamrock gets a belly-to-belly suplex from Mark Henry. And then Henry gives, Henry gives him a big splash. And then D'Lo gives the frog splash, which is called the lowdown. And then Rock puts the boots to Shamrock. And
the entire time, Old Hill Rock was great.
Oh, yeah. But my frustration that I'm running into, again, I'm going to give the segment decent marks because, you have Ken Shamrock in there. And even with the Nation of Domination, it's going somewhere in terms of a feud. It's elevating Ken Shamrock, making people care about him. So I like that aspect. But
it buries the shit out of Mark Barrow.
Yep.
Continue for the next 6 months before he finally quit, I think.
Now, I am going to make this observation. When you look at WWF jobbers of this era, They were
he
jobbers.
Was supposed to be a jobber, remember?
Yeah, well, okay, he jobbed in this case.
And in this case, like this is a downward spiral.
Yeah. But when you looked at undercard talent in WWF on the roster, going against the people that they're trying to get over, in this case Ken Shamrock, those guys who were doing the job were actually someone who, even though I hate Mark Marrow, he's someone who's actually presentable in a wrestling format, okay? Now, contrast that with the randos that you routinely got on WCW, where it's like, wait, where's that guy been? Oh, he's been in Japan for like 5 years, and he didn't get over there. He didn't get over anywhere else, and now he's wrestling Scott Steiner, and he's going to get his ass kicked. And you're like, okay, in that case, I'd rather watch Mark Marrow get his ass kicked.
Well, he has a background. Like I said, he has years of experience in WCW. The big wrestling fan knows who he was even before he was Mark Marrow. And when you start talking about randos, I thought you were going on a long spiel about your time as an ensign, but I digress.
Yeah, so that's one of the areas that I think, like, apart from Matt Knowles, like just some local indie guy that they threw in there to get beat up by Luna.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
the people who got squashed, like Brian Christopher, was a good hand as a jobber.
He was a character on TV already.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to what you were saying about the thinness of the WWF roster. It facilitated that, where you're not pulling in Barry Darso, who we'll end up seeing in Nitro, and I'll save any of my comments towards that. Or seeing like, oh, hey, we need Hacksaw Jim Duggan to come in there. And you're like, oh, fuck, I don't want to watch Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Like, get me started on that shit. But I don't know, that's kind of my view.
I might save it for the Nitro, but I have a lot of things to say about Barry Darso. It's very bizarre, but there's a reason I love him as a shoot talker, because he loses all the tough guy, and he's just a good old boy from Minnesota, don't you know? Wait
until you watch the Nitro.
There were some tough boys. We get in the ring with them, and they just beat us up. They were tough. And he just has that accent, and I just like, you're so adorable. He's like a 6'5" muscle man, but he just talks like, just a dude from Minnesota,
Well, just wait until you watch Nitro.
I love Barry Darso, and you can't take that from me.
I think you'll be changing your tune. It's my prediction.
Well, I'm looking at him as a shoot talker, not as like a character. So. Yeah.
So what'd you think? How would you grade this?
It's a C-.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it a C, because it had Ken Shamrock and The Rock in it, and D'Lo.
Yeah, all that, and like it just felt like a mess to me. Like this could have been. I mean, they're filling time here. They have 2 hours to fill, and everything's got to be an angle. They're like nothing's clean, and this is part of the problem with the Russo era. Everything's crashed. Nothing,
But are you?
Things get carried in the meantime. And then that's where I feel this match what happened.
But are you at least interested in a potential Ken Shamrock payoff?
No, I don't feel like they accomplished it with this. It's the start of something else. And it just feels very disjointed, and you're kind of losing Mark Marrow, who's in like one of the hottest angles at the time was just being married to Sable. And he's basically burying him to get over Ken Shamrock, get over his wife. And
if you need to bury Mark Marrow, I stand by this. Damn it!
You know what? You're right. You could do worse than Mark Marrow, who's kind of useless at this point.
If you need to bury Mark, if one Mark Marrow needs to die for a Ken Shamrock to emerge, I will take that any day. Damn it!
Fair enough. I'll buy it. Okay, but yeah, that's it's a solid C.
Yeah,
the Christ TV era, and this is like about 6 months before it gets really bad. This is like where the Christ TV stuff sets in, which is like, looking at it in retrospect, like a lot of this made no fucking sense.
Yeah. So, you want to lead us into segment 10?
Yeah, I got a lot about this one. Segment 10 is Undertaker coming out and giving a very, very long promo. Interesting thing here, the most over person on this show is Taker. Just above Stone Cold.
That surprised me, but you're right.
Well, it doesn't surprise me because I grew up through his era from 1990. Yeah, I'd say it's him, and Stone Cold's about right there. Stone Cold's like a month away from eclipsing him. But at this point, he's still the most over guy in the company. And he can do no wrong, and he's in the middle of a hot fucking angle with Paul Bearer and Kane. So that adds to it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is not a good promo. He talks way too much. He exposes his character too much. He doesn't talk well.
What do you think? When you say he exposed his character, I think I know where you're going with it. But what specifically was your feeling on that?
He talks too much. Given way too much. Like, watch what he just did last Monday at this recording. He's talking shit about Triple H.
Yeah.
He understands when to talk and when to shut up. Back then, this is like they basically just gave him the keys to start talking. Before that, he was just rest in peace. And now he's like talking stuff, and he's new at it. And sometimes he hits the mark. Sometimes he just comes off as a goof. And if he was not the Undertaker, he was not as over as he was. This promo should have bombed. It's that bad. It's fucking bad. Saving grace of this entire segment is Paul Bearer just absolutely 100% into the character he's in and getting the segment over. I give this all to Percy Pringle. The only reason this worked is how over the Undertaker is and how well Paul Bearer did it. Not that Glenn Jacobs had to do shit to stand there, but you get my point.
So my initial impressions were, number one, Kane is very impressive. Like, as a monster, he's terrifying. He's jacked.
They hit gold with that guy. They hit gold after two failed runs as a dentist and as a fake Razor Ramon. They finally figured out what to do with this giant dude who can.
His outfit is great. I did feel that, of course, Paul Bearer, Kane takes a sledgehammer and destroys, Undertaker's parents' tombstones.
Oh, God, it's so bad.
Yeah, and then he sets him on fire. And my thought on this was that when this angle started, they were like, okay, Undertaker, you're going to have a brother, and then we want you to show we want you to be a little bit more vulnerable, okay, to put over Kane. 100%. And unfortunately, I think he became a little too vulnerable in this angle, because it's a fine line. Like, how do you draw that line in being, super vulnerable or just being a little bit showing a little bit of fear?
They had done this angle 3 years down the line where Taker had more time and experience to be a promo, which he had never been given till this point. It would have worked way better. Is my opinion on it, because we know Undertaker can become a good promo. At this point, he sucks. And it drags it down, and you put the cheesy nature of the stupid break family gravestones. Oh, my bad. And it's only saved by pure charismatic overness of who Taker is, and the fact that Pete Bizzle just keeps it real. He's just in the character 24/7.
Yeah, because why couldn't it have just been, from a critique on the angle, why couldn't it have just been that you have his brother and he got, he's a twisted brother and he doesn't like Taker and he wants to, and maybe there's a fire, but don't play up the humanity of the Undertaker. He's undead.
They didn't know where they're going with him, because he was a throwback at this point to a different era, and now they're in the era of reality. And you still have this undead dude, and you still have this storyline which involves, Mexican soap opera shit, pretty much, and and then a bit of religious symbolism also.
But yeah,
it's not acted out as well, and the storyline would get more convoluted as it goes along. Like, this is the beginning of how, and unfortunately, Taker's stuck here, having to learn how to get a promo in a bad situation where it's like, it's lucky he's over. It's lucky the storyline's over. Lucky Glenn Jacobs is the perfect person for this role. Imagine if it was Bryan Adams. How fizzled out.
Yeah.
This would be like one of those great. You watch one of those videos on YouTube, like greatest mistakes of WWE. Brian Clark as Kane would have been one.
Yeah.
So
but Brian Clark as Adam Bomb was not a mistake.
So you say.
So I say. Come on. He was fucking awesome. 3 Mile.
Is he Glenn fucking Jacobs?
You know what? I would have loved to see Adam Bomb get over and then have a match against Undertaker, and I'm taking that to my grave.
He's had matches with the Undertaker.
Well, a different one. a better match.
I think this was a big rotten egg in the middle of this show that was going on.
Yeah.
It drug it down, and it's like I talked the file I sent you. What Jim Cornette talked about. The fans don't see what they don't want to see, right? The Stone Cold stomps on the hole in the corner. Stomps are actually kind of weak, but the fans don't. They choose not to see it. They choose badass.
Yeah.
Overlook the Undertaker as a weak promo here because he's the fucking Undertaker.
Kane as his foil just works so well because he's terrifying.
And luckily he's working against someone who could fill the role. So if it was a Bryan Adams, if it was Bryan Adams, it'd be more interesting.
Yeah.
If it was another person playing that, someone who wasn't as good as Glenn Jacobs is, he's been playing this role for 30 freaking years now.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, this angle could have bombed in so many ways, and it did not. But this is a low point in this angle.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be the high point.
You haven't talked about Mr. Percy Pringle, Mr. Paul Bearer, how good he is.
Yeah, and Paul Bearer classic. He's able to convey a creepiness that is sorely missing. Well, until Bray Wyatt did a lot of creepiness, and especially the spider walk. But
yeah,
then they ruined him. So
Sinister Minister. There's a few guys who can do it. Yeah, Paul Bearer, Percy. I'm forgetting his real name, but yeah, he was a
Percy Pringle.
Percy Pringle the third. From Percy Pringles, he was the third one.
Yeah. So,
but he loved it. He absolutely loved every part. He loved being Paul Bearer. He loved being part of the business, and it shows in how good his character was.
Yeah. And the characters were protected. That's the other thing,
Yep.
It's an example of today, and I think it's been lost today. Where I get it.
When did Kane lose? It was like 4 fucking years. I know it was finally lost on Raw against Austin later that year after Hell in the Cell with Cactus Jack when he won that first ball.
Yeah.
Kane didn't lose for a fucking year.
Yeah.
And that's how you protect.
Yeah, and the other thing, it's also protecting your gimmick and protecting kayfabe, where you can take it too far. I get it. We're in the modern era where the wrestling environment has totally changed. The ability to suspend disbelief.
We tell who's married to who, and it's like, oh yeah, right. The Miz is with Maurice, and Dean Ambrose is what's her name on the chick just took over on Raw.
Yeah. But you know who protects kayfabe? One of my favorite wrestlers, Dolph Ziggler.
I mean, Dolph never's out of character. You run into him in the person, he's going to be an asshole to you.
Yeah. You can still do it in the modern era. Sami Callihan over in TNA was trying to do that.
Chris Jericho got in a fight. Chris Jericho got in an actual legal altercation over him.
Yeah.
Protect his character. Because he's one of the last of the real.
Yep. So you can still do it in the modern era. Unfortunately, people don't more often than not.
Dolph is one of the greatest wrestlers they have. Him and Seth Rollins, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a huge Drew McIntyre mark. I love him.
Yeah, Drew's like one of the best big men I've seen since Big Boss Man.
When he did the kip up, holy shit. But let's get we're getting sidetracked. Let's go to segment 11, New Age Outlaws and Triple H with China and X-Pac versus the Disciples of Apocalypse, also known as DOA, and they also might be a white power faction. We haven't decided yet. According to JR, this is a total slobber knocker to start. DOA cleans house and says, this is our yard. X-Pac joins at the commentary table and does X-Pac things. Gunn sells for the Harris twins. He takes a nice double slam from DOA, tag to Helmsley. He isolates one of the twins. He fights out, but runs into a facebuster. Road Dogg tags in, hits the shaky knee drop. X-Pac tells Ross he did time down south, and now he's back where he belongs in the WWF. And we get commercials. We return. Helmsley takes a spinning side slam by 8-Ball or Skull, whichever one it happens to be. You get a hot you get a hot tag to Chains, and then the match breaks down. Gunn helps out with the distraction.
I have it in my mind also. It was Chains.
It was, yeah. And then Helmsley, he gets a pedigree for the win. This goes 6:35, and then X-Pac helps out his buddies with a chair. To make matters worse for DOA, Gunn gives Chains a pile driver on a chair, and then Chains, he's out. They then tie him to the ropes so that they can flog him some more. That's when LOD 2000 and beautiful Sunny, before she went off the rails and turned into a coke whore, come down for the save.
We're on that edge, by the way, my friend. We're right on that edge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she's going downhill, and it's like a year later. She just looks like hell. And then
I feel sorry for Tammy. I love Tammy, but
yeah,
you're a whore. Sorry.
And then the fight continues off air. So basically, what happens is you now have this setup with LOD and DOA against the New Age Out, basically DX. That's kind of how it ends. What are your thoughts? How do you grade this out?
I graded O as a C-, but there's a point I want to mention about. You mentioned X-Pac comes out, and he JR and King on commentary. The first thing he says is, "King, I expect you what you've accomplished in this business." And King, "Expect what you've been doing around here." There's a lot more subtext to that.
So he says. What?
I know. I sent you my notes on this. Like, how much of that situation did you know existed before I told you?
None of it.
Okay, so a little background here. When King first came to WWF, and he was a heel, and he was doing his heel commentary, a lot of people did not like him. He came from Memphis. A lot of those people got screwed over, from what I understand, on pay. And he was one of the bookers. Him and Jerry Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett's dad, who is, I think, just left the company at this point. He was supposed to be take over for Vince, and he went to jail for the steroid trial. You know any of that?
No, I don't.
Okay, very, very interesting little. This is why Memphis and WWF became so cozy. Is when Vince was on trial, he was like, "If I got to go to jail for 2 years, I need someone who knows how wrestling works, who I haven't completely pissed off in the business, that'll come up here and run it for me." He picked Jerry Jarrett. Memphis, and behind the scenes, Memphis and WWF had always been good friends. Despite, Jerry the King Lawler has always been on TV talking about, like, I'll fight Hulk Hogan, I'll fight Ultimate Warrior, like, whoever these bullshit champions they have, these people need to come to Memphis and fight me. Like, he was always very anti them. In reality, they always had a good working relationship. Hence, Jerry Jarrett, Jeff Jarrett, King, Brian Christopher, Tennessee Lee, all these guys coming up to Memphis. Why they had the Memphis territory where Kurt Angle and The Rock all broke in, right?
Right.
You're aware of all this.
So, right, yeah, absolutely.
So when King first came in, and from my knowledge, there was no bad blood at that time between X-Pac and Jerry King Lawler, but a lot of X-Pac's friends had a different opinion and hated Jerry Lawler. Jerry comes in, of course, he wears the crown to the ring. He's Jerry Lawler. At this point, his crown got shit in. It was a message from the boys, you're not welcome here. He almost quit over it.
Oh, jeez. And he got that crown from Harley Race.
There's a lot of crown. I don't know if that was that specific. I read the book and he talked about it. I don't remember him saying it was like a specific crown he got from Harley.
I don't know. I heard it somewhere.
But yeah, he came to Vince with a crown full of shit and said, like, I don't like working conditions. I'm just going to go back to Memphis. And Vince convinced him to stay. But apparently the actual dutier was X-Pac. Under X-Pac drunk and full of drugs, and a lot of people were like just pushing him to like just be an asshole. And he wouldn't shit in his fucking crown. This is well known, and once this came out, there was a lot of bad blood, obviously, between Jerry and X-Pac. So, I see when he came out and immediately said that, that was the subtext. It's like, hey man, just for the record, I wasn't trying to fuck with you. Hey, I respect you.
Yeah.
And Jerry just kind of, as Jerry Lawler does, kind of brush it off. Like, yeah, we're cool. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
To me, that was the most fascinating part of the match.
That's interesting.
I don't fucking care about DOA DX. DOA is here to get buried and they get buried.
Yeah, I didn't like the pair up. I'm fine with the New Age Outlaws. I enjoyed the New Age Outlaws and I enjoyed DX in this main event. But my biggest problem with the Disciples of Apocalypse is all of these other factions had a credible, focal point. The guy that they were trying to get over, and it was clear that DOA was just a bunch of guys that they had, put a biker gimmick on. Imagine how over they could have been if you put, let's say, Brian Pillman as the lead guy. Now we know Brian Pillman, he dies, but somebody like him, right? As sort of the focal point, the guy that they're going to get over. I think you could have something there with the Disciples of Apocalypse, but with that iteration, those three guys, no way. And then I think they would eventually add Crush, because Crush, I don't know who Chains is, but they would add Crush to the DOA, but by that time the bloom was off the rose, so to speak, and so
they were jobbers.
Yeah, they were jobbers and not credible. Could have been something.
Someone high up is their buddy.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I would have liked DOA in this role if they would have put them with somebody. I don't know who that would have been, the guy that they're trying to get over, but like a
strong leader.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, all in all, like when I look at this show, I think it's a B. It's a B show. There's good spots, there's bad spots, but all in all, I was entertained. And if I were watching this, I'd wanna see what happens next week. And in fact, right after I watched this, I did watch next week's Raw. So yeah, all in all, I enjoyed it. I think it's pretty emblematic of the Attitude Era of when WWF was starting to turn that corner and take over. But I think what we're gonna see, when you haven't watched Nitro yet, I have watched Nitro, so I don't want to do any spoilers.
I'm about to watch it. So.
Yeah. So like, as far as I'm concerned, like when I watch this show next to the other product, I have a more favorable impression of it than just looking at it isolated, because you see, I can see where this is going. I can see where this is going, and you can see the younger talent that are starting to shine through, and I really enjoy that. I like that, and it does seem like everyone kind of has a purpose. Every match that was on this card, there was an actual purpose, whether it's a good purpose or not. It wasn't just, they're trying to get certain people over, and they're trying to establish long-term storylines, and you can see that. Some of the storylines we might question I don't know whether they're good ideas or not, but I thought that was one of the key takeaways. for me.
I agree with the point on it. It does not exist because they were very focused in trying to get themselves out of the funk area of them being, GOP family cover. And it's like, here we are. We're going to make the use of our time as possible. There's a few things that just fall flat. Undertaker, the whole DX versus DOA. This is like really weak stuff, and like all the best stuff was, the first hour of the show, the first 20 minutes, even the hour 20 minutes, even the stuff that never would go anywhere was at least interesting. And I found like they had no idea how to where they needed to end the show on. They should have ended the show on probably Undertaker or probably Austin McMahon at some point. And I think they
totally agree. Yep. That should have been it.
But overall, no, this is not a bad show. This is not one of the ones I was thinking of. Like, in terms of what I wanted this experiment to be, it would probably be more of a later 98 or a possibly 99 show, which is just full of so much bullshit. This was not bad. It's really not bad, and there's still people in charge who really want to get over wrestling stuff. Jim Cornette's still never a creative team at this point. He's doing stuff, and we're trying to get this over and that over, and then Russo's just his little tendrils are just starting to kind of show at this point. And I think if I were to have to pick something, I would pick something for a little later down this line to get my point. But overall, no, you're right. You win this. This show is a solid B. It's not a bad show.
So why don't we do this then? Okay. So we're gonna watch Nitro, and then we're gonna talk about that. I've already watched Nitro, and I've tried to not allow that to influence me too much. But we're gonna do part 2 is gonna be Nitro from April 6th, 1998. Then what we'll do is we'll go and we will pick 2 Russo shows. And actually, you're going to pick the Russo shows. So you're going to pick one one that is from...
Is that an order, sir?
That is an order, yeah. But the only concern I have with the WC... Because we can easily find a later 98 Russo, where he was clearly in charge. But on the WCW, the only problem is, he was back and forth, getting fired, coming back. So I think we have to do one where maybe the Pope Mobile. It's a good emblem. I don't know. You probably have a better perception of this, and then I'm interested to see what our thoughts are on that, because it sort of exemplifies the hot shot booking and sort of Crash TV. And how does that play? Is it as bad as maybe people have said it is, or is it even worse, or is it kind of awesome? I don't know.
I have crystallized memories of some of the worst of Russo on WCW. I can definitely pick some of those shows.
Yeah.
Just going against WWE doing the McMahon Helmsley era, the Renegades coming in, and Jericho. Up against all that, and The Rock on the top of his game. I mean, and you compare that to WCW was and what Russo was booking at the time is it's that is a problems on the WWE end for sure, but the problems are on a unfiltered Russo over on WCW.
And I don't know. I don't know how I feel. I remember.
This was a good show. This was a good show. By any means, you think about what a good Raw is. This was a good Raw. I agree with you. This is why they started winning back the ratings war. It's episodes like this that had faults, but the strong points were really strong. Mick Foley, Stone Cold versus McMahon. These things really, really stood out, and people remembered.
For me, the fact that every wrestler on the show, if I had to give a few sentences of what this wrestler is about, who they are, I'd be able to do that. I think is a credit to the character development.
You didn't know about Too Cold? Did you really know?
I knew about Too Cold. You know who he lost to? Shane Douglas for the NWA World Title. Shane Douglas then held up the title and then dropped it and then held up the gave one of the greatest wrestling promos in history, and one of the most important wrestling promos in history, in which he declared himself the ECW World Heavyweight Champion.
Your facts are a little skewed on that, but overall you're correct.
What? He was against Too Cold Scorpio?
We'll go over that. That is on the network. We can go over that entire card.
Yeah. So I think that closes us out for today, and then we'll reconvene and do the Nitro Part 2.